Stories Philippines Podcast.
A shadow floats, unseen but potent, in the deepest corner of every Filipino bedroom. It is not the sort of creature that bares its teeth in a lurid grin. It is not a banshee wailing from the tops of ancient trees. Rather, it is a slow, patient dread that steps in with the gentle closing of eyelids. A presence that stalks the sleeper as sleep leaves the mind unlocked, unguarded, and defenseless. Night fast approaches, and the ordinary becomes faintly, disturbingly unfamiliar. In those small, hushed hours, the walls seem to breathe. The wind feels somehow thicker as it moves through window slats, and the heartbeat quiets a little too soon, as if the body itself is slowing to listen. Does the sleeping person dream, or have they themselves become the dream? Is it merely sleep, or some other thing, soft and impossible to resist, running long, patient fingers across the chest, and stealing breath with a tenderness that is lethal? And what would happen, we wonder, if a nightmare could truly kill? If the terror that visits at night could reach past the veil and take a life as surely as any fever or wound? A deepening darkness permeates this episode, one that lingers over domestic scenes and invades ordinary corners with an insistence that may unsettle. The material ahead engages with sudden, unexplained deaths, with hauntings that feel like a familiar hand on the shoulder, and with the thin, trembling boundary between life and loss within the sanctity of the home. It explores grief that arrives without warning, and the uncanny intimacies of night terrors that feel almost like visits from another world. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The content to follow contains depictions and themes of sudden death, spectral presence, and the fragile line separating sleep from finality, which some may find deeply disquieting. I am Jessica, and you are listening to Stories Philippines Podcast, Season 5, Episode 6. Some say the scariest thing about nightmares is waking up and discovering the world still intact, the bedsheets rumpled, the pulse hastened by memory. Others know there is something even darker than that momentary shock. Not waking at all. Slipping into an abyss where the mind never finds a route back to day. Bangungot. In Filipino folklore, it is the nightmare that kills, an old terror given a name that trembles on the tongue. Science, attempting to strip the terror of its myth, calls it sudden, unexpected nocturnal death syndrome. In older stories, the menace takes on more tangible, grotesque form. The Batibat, a spirit both heavy and malevolent, often said to dwell in wooden pillars and beams cut from ancient, venerated trees. According to Ilocano traditions, if you sleep too near a Batibat's domain, or if the wood used in your house was once part of such a tree, the spirit might creep into the bedroom at night, assume the shape of a bloated, suffocating shadow, and press down upon a victim's chest until breath gives way. The image is terrible and specific, an unseen weight, a pressure that pins and stifles, the slow ebbing of life under a seemingly physical force. This terrifying figure is not confined to the Ilocos region alone. Across the Philippine archipelago, many provinces whisper of similar nocturnal predators, each culture shading the tale with its own details. In Tagalog-speaking regions, the fear is often personified as an evil hag, or sometimes as a twisted, looming shadow that latches onto sleepers and feeds upon their life force. The variations are many, but the theme is consistent. an external, animate presence that visits at night to take the living without warning. Though fear walks through history with a lantern of images and names, it also leaves footprints in the clinical language of medicine. Sons appears in coroners' registers and hospital case notes, marking the sudden passing of young, apparently healthy men in the night. Most frequently among Filipino populations, but also documented among Hmong, Thai, and certain Japanese communities. The pattern is haunting. No chronic illness, no preceding symptoms that would explain cardiac collapse, no signs that would comfort investigators who crave a cause. Hearts stop in sleep. Mornings bring silence. Families are left with questions. It provoked so much perplexity that international teams of physicians and researchers were dispatched to Manila and rural provinces during the 1970s to investigate, and they returned with more puzzlement than closure. The global connection here proved more than anecdotal. When Hmong refugees migrated to the United States after the upheavals of the Vietnam War, American clinicians began to encounter identical, baffling nocturnal deaths in that population. The striking similarity of these cases across oceans and cultures helped coin and popularize the term sons, suggesting that something, perhaps cultural, perhaps genetic, perhaps both, was traveling with people as they moved across continents. The reach of the phenomenon, therefore, was dark and transnational, an unsettling fusion of biology, environment, and cultural vulnerability that stubbornly refused simple explanation and demanded interdisciplinary attention. And yet, for every perplexed physician scratching notes and running tests, folk wisdom continued whispering its own accounts and remedies in village after village. In traditional lore, death by night is often framed as an act of vengeance, a punishment for trespassing on the Bati-Bat's sacred tree, or for disrespecting the spirits said to reside within timber and trunks. If the furniture creaks with a strange sound, or if certain beams were known to come from an old grove, elders counsel against sleeping nearby. Better to move your bed, or to smoke sage, or to offer propitiatory rites. Such practices may seem quaint or superstitious to modern sensibilities, yet they persist because they provide people with a language for grief and a set of actions, however symbolic, that feel like control when the body offers none, and medical explanations remain incomplete. These beliefs resonate with broader, cross-cultural patterns. In Western folklore, one also finds spirits bound to particular objects or places, ancient burial mounds, cursed artifacts, or houses with troubled histories. The human instinct to attribute sudden, inexplicable death to an external, malevolent force rather than to inscrutable biology is nearly universal. It is often easier, perhaps, to imagine an enemy that can be bargained with or placated than to accept the randomness of a silent physiological collapse. The stories of the Bati-Bat, Bangungot, and related traditions thus perform a distinct social function. They explain, warn, prescribe ritual, and help communities manage fear in the face of the night's inscrutable power, offering solidarity, ritualized responses, and a framework for mourning when science cannot yet provide closure. Meanwhile, doctors traced links: sudden arrhythmia, rare genetic disorders like Brugada syndrome, and, in some clusters, a fatal cascade triggered by combining starchy foods with alcohol before bed. Yet, despite modern tests, some cases remain unsolved, leaving families clinging to folklore for heartbreaking, needed closure. Science and myth walk hand in hand, spiraling from the provincial town to the modern city. Some find safety in clinical explanations, others find comfort in the old wisdom of healers and elders. Folk remedies urge those caught in a nightmare to bite their thumb or wriggle their toes, ways to break the Bati-Bat's grip and return the soul to waking life. The simple act of wiggling a toe is a physical action, a tether back to the body, a defiance against the paralysis that defines the experience of being pinned down by the spirit. River, from General Santos, sent a report of a dream that felt less like sleep and more like a scene staged by something cold and patient. After a long day, River lay down among pillows and blankets. At first, everything felt ordinary, then subtly wrong. Angles in the room seemed skewed, shadows misplaced, the geometry of the space bending as if it were a set built for a play. A child stood at the foot of the bed, silent and still, and made a small, insistent gesture. "Follow me." River rose and walked with the child through that warped room toward the gate. The air was thick, each step heavier than it should have been. When they reached the threshold, the child bit River's hand. The bite was vicious and immediate, not the frantic nip of a frightened animal, but deliberate, deep, and full of pain. River cried out and ran, seeking help. In the doorway appeared the face of their late mother, calm but grave, saying that an albulario was required. River woke, only to find, in waking light, a perfect bite mark blooming on the skin where the child had bitten. The wound was real, a small, round bruise and split flesh as clear as any waking injury. A physical mark emerging from a nocturnal experience is one of the details that pushes a story beyond ordinary nightmares. In many reports like River's, such marks are interpreted as evidence of a breach between the sleeping person and something that occupies the world of night. An incursion so intimate it can leave a trace on flesh. For those who grew up with stories of spirits and spirit healers, a wound like this is read as more than coincidence. It can be a sign of a spiritual attack, a claim placed on the body that demands ritual attention. Clinically, it raises questions about sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, and nocturnal movement. But culturally, it is read through a different set of meanings, one that treats marks, voices, and apparitions as parts of a single event that ties the dreamer into a wider web of kin, history, and the unseen. Tipoy from Quezon City described a different texture of disturbance. Not a single violent encounter, but a prolonged, possessive attention. In Tipoy's account, there is no visible figure to confront. Rather, a presence insinuates itself into the ordinary rhythms of the apartment. It presses closer each night, a persistent weight on the bed that is neither wholly external nor entirely imagined. The sensation reads like courtship in the old narratives, not gentle or romantic, but insistently domestic. Someone or something learning the layout of the place, testing boundaries, asking in its own way for a compact or exchange. Tipoy lives amid the constant motion of the city and spans communities from Mindanao to Camotes. That layered identity of movement, resettlement, and held anxieties shapes how the experience is felt. Displacement and chronic stress are common backdrops in many reports. They change the home from a firm refuge into a permeable zone where the self is more vulnerable. It is important to notice how these incidents unfold in the modern world. Tipoy's haunting plays out in a high-rise district of a busy metropolis, disproving the tidy idea that spirits only lurk in distant, rural places. Urban life, its isolation, the anonymity of neighbors, the pressure of long commutes and precarious livelihoods, creates its own kind of thinness in daily life. People asleep after long shifts, affections tethered across distance, families stretched across islands. Such conditions can amplify experiences people interpret as supernatural. Whether through folklore or through stress-altered perception, these episodes are not limited by geography. They follow people into cities and apartments, into the hum of electricity and the glow of neon. Both stories show different faces of what people here call bangungot. River's experience has a sharp, concrete aftermath, a bite mark that provokes immediate questions about intervention, lineage, and protection. Tipoy's case illustrates a slow, undermining intimacy that insists on being acknowledged over time. Together, they underline a recurring pattern: These events layer personal history, cultural frameworks, and bodily experience. To some, such incidents call for the ritual skills of an albulario or faith in traditional safeguards. To others, they invite medical or psychiatric inquiry into sleep disorders, stress reactions, and dissociative phenomena. In practice, many people seek both kinds of help, spiritual and clinical, because the experiences affect mind, body, and household in ways that a single approach rarely resolves. If you have a first-person account of something that crept into your sleep and left a trace, or of a persistent presence that made itself at home, send your story to storiesphpodcast@gmail.com. The third account, Joanna's, moves into the territory of sleepwalking and disturbed perception, merging real life with the disorienting double vision of a trance state. One October night, with family tents set up indoors for a makeshift camp, Joanna recalls seeing her sister, Trisha, engaged in conversation with someone who was not there. A perfect doppelganger, an exact double of a cousin who should not have been present. When the trance suddenly broke, fear surged through Trisha so violently that she fainted and needed assistance to return to herself. As with Bangungot, the boundaries between waking reality and nightmare become porous, leaving the body exposed to phenomena science cannot always measure or explain. The element of the doppelganger in this account is especially unnerving, a mirrored figure visible only to Trisha that speaks to the profound dissociation characteristic of sleep paralysis or deep dream states. It functions as a vivid visual metaphor for the self being pulled away from the body, a description frequently found in narratives of soul flight, out-of-body experiences, and other liminal states where subjective perception dramatically diverges from consensual reality. Kiara's memory, by contrast, situates the uncanny in a place where we usually feel safe and visible, a well-lit classroom during grade 5. This episode underscores that Bangungot and unexplained terror do not always confine themselves to bedrooms or the dark. They can intrude into schoolrooms and daytime routines. Occurring in bright daylight and in a public, structured environment, the event defies the typical expectation that such horrors strike only under the cover of night. The shared experience of fear in a crowded, well-lit space complicates the usual narrative of nocturnal hauntings, and suggests that the source of dread may be tied less to darkness and more to shared history, collective memory, or an intense communal anxiety that saturates a place. This resonates with the idea that locations with traumatic pasts, schools, homes, sites of tragedy, may retain a psychic residue that affects those who inhabit them, producing sensations of unease or episodes that feel supernatural to those who experience them. Find show notes and support options in the description for those who may be affected by similar memories or need resources. Finally, the anonymous Dalawang Pa tale offers an economy of detail that makes it all the more disturbing. As a child waking around 8 in the morning, the narrator glimpses 2 feet moving through the family home. Nothing more, no full figure, no face, just 2 feet crossing rooms in a manner that feels both intimate and alien. Whether real or imagined, the memory lingers and returns to haunt the narrator for years, serving as a concise and potent metaphor for Bangungot itself. Proximate, persistent, and unresolved. The stark simplicity of this final image, only 2 feet, intensifies the terror because it is an incomplete form, a presence that fails to cohere into a full human body. That partial manifestation implies a spiritual or liminal being that exists at the threshold of visibility, a silent observer moving through familiar domestic spaces. The fragmented nature of the apparition echoes how nightmares and unexplained encounters often leave only half-formed impressions behind, which continue to trouble the mind long after the moment has passed. From these stories, patterns emerge more clearly with each retelling. Recurring are spectral figures, sometimes recognizable family members, sometimes anonymous strangers, pressing close on the sleeper's chest or watching in silence from the corner. Recurring, too, is the impossibility of movement or sound, a paralyzing immobility that has been documented in cultures around the globe, from Japan's Pokuri syndrome to Lai Tai in Thailand, and similar reports across continents. It is as if the whole world, not just the Philippines, dreams a comparable nightmare. Across different cultures and languages, the core description is strikingly similar: an immense, crushing pressure on the chest, a sudden inability to move or speak, and a distinct sense of a malevolent presence nearby. This cross-cultural consistency suggests a deeply rooted human phenomenon that transcends mere local folklore and points toward a possible universal biological trigger that the human mind often interprets in spiritual terms. But Bangungod also invites deeper reflection about cause and context. Why do certain families or communities encounter this fate more often than others? Does the unseen weight arise from inherited genes, chronic stress, cultural expectation, or repeated stories whispered on long nights? Modern science offers concrete leads. Electrical disorders such as Brugada syndrome or acute physical triggers like pancreatitis or other metabolic disturbances following heavy feasting. But every clinical solution uncovers further questions. Not every victim fits the neat diagnostic profile, and medical explanations do not always dispel the eerie finality of the experience. Sometimes the only remaining answer for those left behind is a shadow in a cracked mirror, an image that refuses to be explained away. The psychological weight of this fear within Filipino communities is undeniable and deserves careful attention. It is an anxiety transmitted across generations, an invisible inheritance of dread that shapes sleep, storytelling, and communal responses to sudden nocturnal death. When a community holds a deep-seated belief in a terrifying phenomenon, the collective trauma and expectation can produce very real physical manifestations, blurring the boundaries between psychosomatic reaction and perceived spiritual attack. Collective belief can influence physiology, and the interplay between cultural narrative and bodily response becomes part of the story itself. Follow us on social media for daily folklore facts and ongoing discussion. The study of Brugada syndrome holds particular significance in this context. This inherited arrhythmic condition, which can precipitate sudden cardiac arrest during sleep, is notably more prevalent among Southeast Asian populations, including Filipinos. Clinically, it can present in ways that perfectly mimic the folkloric Bangungot, an apparently peaceful sleeper who never wakes, sometimes without any outward sign of struggle. That overlap creates a chilling dual narrative, a scientific explanation that lends credibility and the measure of understanding to the fear, while simultaneously leaving room for spiritual interpretation to persist. Since medical causes do not account for every case, the coexistence of biological vulnerability and powerful cultural meaning ensures that both explanations, clinical and supernatural, continue to inform how communities interpret and cope with these tragic events. To truly understand the depth of the fear, we must look carefully at the geography and environment that gave rise to it. The Philippines, with its dense rainforests, tangled undergrowth, and ancient volcanic soil, is a land saturated with life and memory. It is a landscape that has nurtured animistic tradition for countless generations. In this worldview, every tree, every mountain ridge, every river bend was once home to a spirit or guardian presence. These spirits were woven into daily life and ritual, respected through offerings and cautionary tales. The Batibat, being a spirit of the lumber and the fallen tree, is therefore a direct and poignant challenge to the modern Filipino home, which increasingly relies on cutting down those same ancient trees for shelter and livelihood. The fear it invokes functions like a spiritual tax, a haunting payment for modernity, a persistent reminder that the land and its old powers are not easily forgotten, exercised, or wholly conquered by progress. To sleep in a house built from wood taken from the forest is, within this cultural logic, to invite the spirit of the forest right into your bedroom, bringing with it both the weight of history and the moral complexity of ecological loss. The cultural parallel is striking and widespread. In Mexico, the condition is sometimes referred to as subirse el muerto, literally the dead person climbing on you, an expression that conjures the same terrifying pressure of an invisible weight bearing down on the chest, a direct parallel to the Batibat's reputed act of sitting on the sleeper's sternum. In Newfoundland and parts of Anglo-Celtic folklore, it is known as the Old Hag. In parts of West Africa, there are similar accounts under different names. In Japan, Kanashibari evokes comparable sensations. These names and stories, separated by oceans and millennia, nevertheless speak to the same universal dread, that precise and disorienting moment when the conscious mind wakes into awareness, but the body refuses to follow, and a hostile, demonic, or melancholic presence seems to fill the gap between perception and movement. When we situate the Batibat alongside such global phenomena, the narrative of Bangungot becomes more than a horror tale. It emerges as a profound cultural commentary on Filipino life and identity. It is an allegory about the fraught tension between the modern, Catholic-influenced urban existence and the older, pre-colonial animistic sensibilities that continue to haunt the Filipino psyche. It touches on the stress of internal migration, the loneliness of laborers who leave rural villages for crowded cities, and the longing for the ancestral home and its protective rituals. The spirit in these stories chooses to appear when the person is most vulnerable, alone in a new room, sleepless in an unfamiliar house, cut off from the safety of family, community ceremonies, and traditional belief systems. It preys on the isolated heart and the frayed nerves of those who are physically sheltered but spiritually dislocated. Read through this lens, the Batibat and the broader experience of sleep paralysis reveal themselves as metaphors for environmental loss, cultural dislocation, and the psychological toll of rapid social change. They remind us that folklore is not merely entertainment, but also a repository of communal anxieties and moral lessons, a way for societies to name and give form to fears that are otherwise diffuse. In short, to tell the story of Bangungot is to tell the story of a people negotiating the costs of modernity, negotiating grief over the stolen forest, and negotiating the aching distance between the present and the ancestral past. Access exclusive content on Patreon. A final, disturbing historical note connects this to the early Spanish colonial period. Records from the 16th and 17th centuries speak of inexplicable deaths among indigenous workers who were forced to labor in the mines or forests. These deaths, often attributed to divine displeasure by the Spanish clergy, were perhaps the earliest recorded instances of what we now call bangungot, a stress-induced trauma or undiagnosed cardiac issue exacerbated by extreme hardship and displacement. The Catholic view, which sees all inexplicable phenomena through the lens of sin or divine will, often served to suppress the older animistic explanations, but could not suppress the deaths themselves. For centuries, the Church's interpretation offered a kind of closure, a moral explanation for a biological tragedy that was at odds with the deeply personal terror of the Batibat. The ultimate power of the bangungot is not that it kills, but that it leaves a question mark where a loved one used to be. It is death without cause, a sudden absence that invites the mind to fill the void with the most terrifying answer possible: a vengeful, invisible hand. The silence left behind is often more deafening than any scream. The house seems to hold its breath, waiting for the spirit to move from the rafters to the bedside again. The fear of bangungot changes the way families relate to sleep. It makes the bed a possible site of combat, not rest, a place where one must constantly be vigilant, even when the lights are out and the eyes are closed. And so, listeners, tonight you may search your room for answers, turning over every pillow and peering beneath every blanket for explanations that elude the waking mind. Is the air truly silent? Or do the old stories stir in the corners where the light fails? Is safety merely an illusion when dreams are so easily crossed by things both real and imagined? When the thin membrane between what we call ordinary life and the dark territories of sleep feels paper thin? Bangungot warns us how fragile is the border between sleep and death, myth and medicine, waking and the nightmare. It teaches that the simplest exhalation, the quietest hour, can hide a peril our science still struggles to fully name. It is a reminder that the most ancient fears often wear the mask of modernity, disguising themselves in neat explanations and clinical terms while hiding in the silence of a stopped heart. Let us return to the mirror one last time before we blow out the lamp. It reflects faces, yours, mine, those who came before. But sometimes, if the night is long and the shadow heavy, it reflects something else entirely, a profile that does not belong to memory. To see one's own image and trust it is an act of faith in the continuity of self. To see a stranger in the glass, to find features rearranged or expressions that do not mirror your intent, or to lose breath beneath an invisible weight pressing upon your chest, is Bangungot's gift or curse, depending on which side of the threshold you awaken. Such moments make us question whether the person we are in daylight is the same who walks the corridors of sleep, and whether the mirror is a truthful witness or a conspirator. As you settle to sleep tonight, and as you smooth your sheets and close your eyes, ask yourself this quietly: if nightmares can truly kill, how safe are any of us when we close our eyes and surrender to that vulnerable state? What precautions, if any, can comfort the heart that races and the mind that conjures impossible presences? Perhaps there are practices, small rituals, or simple reassurances to keep at arm's length those ancient terrors. But the uneasy truth remains. Sleep is a journey that none of us can postpone forever. Remember, fear is not to be conquered but befriended. In sleep, let us hope its embrace is gentle. Treat that thought like a lamp on a dark path, small, steady, and enough to keep the nearest shadows at bay. You are invited to listen to more episodes, both past and future, as we continue our journey through the depths of Filipino folklore, mystery, and dark history, exploring not only what scares us, but why those fears have endured. Join us as we meet other spirits, stories, and unexplained occurrences that live at the intersection of culture and the uncanny. Do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with friends who appreciate the strange and the solemn. Support the podcast financially in ways you can find in the show notes. Every bit helps us research, record, and bring these tales to you with care. Thank you for tuning in, for lending your ears and your imagination, and good night.